Well, thank you for your service, first and foremost. I mean, it's been almost 30 years. How are you feeling now that after almost 30 years, um, that you won't have to be mayor anymore? What are your thoughts going out of office?
Actually, part is relief because just as when I retired from teaching, it's exciting to look at another chapter in my life, spend more time with my husband, who's absolutely wonderful, and my grandchildren and our children, and to move ahead with time to read, time to play, and not have to worry about deadlines. However, I thoroughly enjoyed my jobs, both teaching and being the mayor and CEO of the city of Utica. Very few people, I think, can look back and say that the choices they've made in their life have led to complete satisfaction and fulfillment. And to be very honest, that's how I feel right now. Very fulfilled, very excited about looking back proudly and moving ahead.
What are some of your proudest accomplishments, and walk me through some of your highlights from when you took over?
There really are a lot. Everything from starting a city newsletter, televising the council meetings, being very proactive in getting M59 widened. Um, Probably the most substantial was the widening of Van Dyke, the $8 million project, of which the city of Utica only had to spend 1/16, 500,000. Modernizing every department, computerizing, establishing policies, procedures, and best practices that simply had not been part of the city's modus operandi in the past. Encouraging the public to get more involved in their local government, sitting on boards and commissions and city council. Definitely, I think in the big picture, looking at the Clinton River as one of our major assets in developing its use, creating the Downtown Development Authority, the streetscape, Memorial Park, our hike and bike trail, and most recently the addition of Jimmy John's Stadium. I really think that overall, Utica is a wonderful little town nestled among giant suburbia, and it's walkable, it's friendly, it's a hometown to be proud of. And I think that I was able to shepherd the city through 29 years of improvements.
I want to go back to the first time you ran for mayor. Do you remember why you ran and what you wanted to accomplish?
Oh, yes. Well, the first time I ran for mayor, I lost in 1985. And my feeling was things have to be done differently, professionally. The standard has to be raised in the sense that the electorate needed to be more involved. We needed to move ahead. We were nearing the end of the 20th century, and I felt like our wonderful little city government was not up to par. It needed to be doing much more. We had a lot of needs, and I felt that they weren't being met. So, doing a needs assessment in 1987, when I was elected mayor, I literally did have a list in my head of things that needed to be done. The city had just hired a professional planner at the urging of a citizens group of which I was part. And I feel that that moved us into a higher level of planning, looking at the big picture. And I had a vision. I had a vision of a wonderful little town that needed to emphasize its assets, its people, the river, and needed to look at outside funding, grants. My litany of improvements began with day one that I took office, January 1 of 1988.
Was it hard, as a self-proclaimed little girl from Utica, to navigate yourself through like an old boys type of political system? What was that like?
Actually, yeah, I was the first woman mayor for the city of Utica, and now as we're approaching our 200th year, apparently that was an important benchmark. But having served 4 years on city council, and in the meantime, I had gone back to Oakland University and gotten my master's degree in public administration, not intending to run for mayor. That wasn't why I did it, but that is a city manager's degree. So it made me more employable as I was heading back into the labor market after having been at home raising with my husband our 5 children. Our second son was graduating that following year. Our first son graduated in 1987, Christopher, and Jerry was graduating in, one graduated in 86, and then Jerry in 87. And I recognized that almost every meeting I sat down at, whether it was the county, the state, with my neighboring communities, most did not have women as CEOs. There were 2, Roseville and Sterling Heights did have lady mayors during my early years, but certainly it was something new for Utica. And I followed in the path of a gentleman, Mr. Fred Beck, who was in office for 26 years. I respected Fred. I just disagreed with him diametrically on how to run the city and what the needs were. And it seemed like the learning curve was pretty tough, but it also worked out that my degree served me well because I was extremely well prepared to launch most of the ideas that I came into office with.
How have things changed since you first took office? I mean, I know that's kind of a broad question, but if you could give like maybe a Cliff Note answer on where you started politically and how things are different now in the landscape. Because government does play a bigger role in our lives than it used to.
Well, just physically, the city offices had one computer that was used for payroll, and the police had their lean machine that was used having to do mostly with criminal and traffic complaints. But we moved forward and computerized all departments, televised council meetings, and really wanted to draw the public into its role because, after all, the first 3 words of the U.S. Constitution are "we the people." Government is of, for, and by the people. Gee, I think somebody important said that once, namely Abe Lincoln. But I was firmly committed to the idea that the city needed to be shepherded forward to find itself, to fulfill its role in Macomb County, and to be as active in moving the city forward to meet the needs of all its citizens and businesses and the transient population. After all, we're at Hall and Van Dyke. M59 and Van Dyke are 2 major roadways in southeastern Michigan. And I really felt that Utica deserved to be a destination, a place that met the needs of its citizens, and yet a walkable, lovable place to live, work, and play.
What if you were doing one more term? If, in fact, you didn't decide that you were going to step in, you were going to do one more term, and you got elected mayor one more time, what would you look to accomplish? What do you think are the next hurdles that Utica's facing in the next 4 years?
Well, I think that we're right on the cusp of, along with the recovery from the Grand Recession, we have a lot of new businesses moving in. I think working with the merchants and business people to make each and every store an attractive, clean, well-kept area, and do the same for the residential area. My hope would be that we would work with the state of Michigan to better fund local government. For my 29 years in office, unfortunately, at least 25 of those, state of Michigan, in my humble opinion, has shortchanged local government in its revenue sharing. And that would have been one of my focal points, is that we would work with the governor and the state legislature to restore the funding that local government deserves under the Headley Amendment. I think that improving our water and sewer, definite needs that in a government, nothing ever remains static. It is not something you can lean back and say we're finished. There are always roads to improve, programs to offer, and citizens and businesses with needs. And I would have hoped, had I stayed in office, that we would have been open to listening, acting, and fulfilling the wishes of our public.
What can be done so that local government does get their fair share?
To quote Tip O'Neill, the longtime Massachusetts House member, all politics are local. This is the level of government that individuals feel most directly. They pay the taxes. Yep, you do to the state and the feds and income tax, but in reality, you drive on your local streets. Your water comes to you from our system. Our police and fire protect you and serve you, and definitely schools and so on. It is absolutely essential that the symbiotic relationship of local government and the state government works. And it only works if the people in charge, like the new mayor, understands the system, understands there's a major flaw, and works in a concerted effort to make change. Change doesn't happen in democracy without majority rule and large segments of the population recognizing that there is a problem. So I think that this funding problem, the fiscal broken system that we have in Michigan of funding local government, that is counties, cities, villages, and townships, needs to be fixed. And the new mayor has to recognize that, use every resource that's available, understand the laws, and work with their cohort to make change. It has to happen.
The federal government does have a large role in our tax base and whatnot, but the decisions made at this level affect my life in a bigger manner. So I wish people would get more riled up about their local races. Would you agree with that summation, that you have more impact on a Utica resident than, say, a president or even a governor?
Well, if you look at, you can't do certain things on your own property without getting the permits, that the regulations that are in place. But they're in place because problems have occurred in the past. Recognize that if you have professionals and guidance and building codes, fire codes to protect the public, the rules and regulations at the local level are there to protect people. They're not there just to drive you crazy, and it's not just a power trip. Everything that's come to be is the rules of the road, whether it's the speed limit or the width of the road or the size of the pipe that brings you water. The fact that you have clean water, those are all issues that affect our everyday life. Every time there's a catastrophic storm, we recognize how the local provision of electricity, water, streets, fire and police, all of those things. Yep, the feds provide, like it says in the preamble to the Constitution, provide for the common defense, Army, Navy. Oh my God, we're so glad we have all of them, the Air Force and so on to protect us. But it is the local level that affects us from the moment we wake up in the morning until we rise the next day. Every part of our day is affected by local government.
When you look back, now that you're looking back, what do you think your legacy will be as mayor of Utica?
Oh, I haven't really thought about that very much. As I said, when I started, I had a list of to-do items that I felt were badly needed. But in the long run, improving the quality of life, because overall, I figured out as an adult that the quality of life is what attracts people to certain areas. Because in modern day, 21st century, you can work and live anywhere. But the quality of your immediate environment is really what matters. And I think if I've helped improve the quality of life and brought people together as opposed to dividing them, then I'll be happy. I'll be glad that I served.
What are you going to do now that you're not mayor? You have no responsibility. What are you going to do with all your time?
My husband will quickly tell you it'll be wonderful. We've been married 52 years, and we do have a place down on the Gulf of Mexico in Gulf Shores, Alabama. We love the ocean. We love the warmer climate for winter. So we will spend 2 or 3 months there in the wintertime. But we also have 4 remaining kids, their spouses, and 12 grandchildren. And all of our grandchildren are very active. So between gymnastics, athletic events, school plays, and so on, I know we'll keep really busy. And if nothing else, it gives me a chance to catch up on my reading. I'm a very avid reader. I used to sew a great deal. I know that Jerry and I will find lots of fun stuff to do, day trips, field trips, and you'll probably see us walking in the neighborhood a lot.
What was it like during this campaign season, not being a candidate? Was it different? Was it weird? Talk to me. What was that like for you?
Well, one of our son's employees doing the winterization on our sprinkling system said, "This is surreal to see somebody else's sign in your front yard." And it really hadn't dawned on me until then. Yep, it did feel different, but that's okay. Like it says in the Bible, there's a season for everything. And this was a good time for me to remove myself from the political landscape and spend more time with my husband. So I really didn't give it much thought. My husband went through some really difficult times health-wise this past summer. So in a way, that brought the reality of there are much more important things in life than running the city of Utica. And I had Jerry's health to distract me, and that helped me get through this really easily.
You know, you hear about close elections. You hear about, what was it in 2000? It was less than 1 million votes that I need to recount. 5 votes. What does that say to you?
I'm not really sure. I guess the 2 candidates must have worked equally hard getting to the electorate. I always caution people when they're going door to door campaigning. You have to be careful what you promise. You have to be well informed and know exactly and be prepared for the questions you're going to face. I really don't know because I was quite surprised at how close it was, but I think it's indicative of 2 really hardworking people who put themselves out there and met a lot of people, obviously influenced their vote.
What advice do you have for the mayor-elect coming in?
The learning curve is very steep. Only those who look at it proactively are going to do well. You have to in-service yourself in all the enabling statutes from the state and the federal level. You have to remember that you are here to serve and that as a public servant, part of your job is to always remain extremely well informed. You have to know the people you work with, the public you serve, the networking of communities around us. You have to get to know the 2 senators, the House members from your district, the county level officials. This is not an isolated silo. It is through networking, reaching out. In my case, I got a degree that helped me a great deal. But it is an ongoing education. The Regional Planning Organization, Michigan Municipal League, the school system, all of the organizations that help an individual city, village, or township government are there. You need to access them, use them, inform yourself. The better and harder you work, the more productive you will be.
What have been your thoughts of this whole political national landscape? To me, it's mad.
I think the bottom line for me, while I was surprised at the result, I think it was indicative of not only a huge divide between government officials and the public they serve, but more importantly, a disenfranchised feeling. A public that chose an outsider because they either don't understand or have not helped themselves to understand what government really is. Because I think this meant we're not being heard. We're not the normal people who would have gotten reelected just didn't happen. We've had elections before where it was sort of throw the bums out, but the reality is, if people are really reaching out, doing a good job, they often do get reelected or elected for the first time if they've served in other levels. I'm not quite sure, but obviously at the federal level, the government needs to think long and hard about what they're doing, what they have done, and what remains to be done, and how they can best meet the needs of their electorate.
A lot of these media outlets that are on mainstream media have been accused and even proven that they manipulate the news, and then that there's a war on internet news and fake news. And what I know that you that's for not for your thing, but as a citizen now, what is your opinion about how the media shapes the political landscape?
I really think social media played a bigger role in this election than it ever has in the past, and that many people use the internet as their major resource, whereas I'm still a print media person. My husband and I subscribe to 2 newspapers, and we really do pay attention. But unfortunately, I'm afraid there is a lot of fake news out there. A lot of people swallowed a lot of stuff on both sides without having being really grounded in fact. On the other hand, there's no question, talking heads on the television screen, people, reporters on the street, there's a concerted effort to shape and deliver the news that gets the highest ratings. I'm not sure how to correct that. I prize freedom of the press and freedom of speech so highly that over the years I've just simply formed an opinion that I'm going to search out a lot of different levels of knowledge, whether it's print media, in books, and I'm a history buff. So I like to look at where we've been, because I truly believe you have to understand where you've been in order to understand where you're going, and I see that completely lacking in today's world.
I know you're going to have several chances to say goodbye to the residents of Utica, but is there anything you'd like to say to them as you say you served these last couple of months?
I had just finished writing my article in our city newsletter, and one of the things I said was it's been an honor and a privilege to work for and with the public in Utica, and that's pretty much it. I am very honored to have served for 29 years as mayor and 4 years on city council. Nothing could be closer to my heart than having been able to make a difference, and I think that's my theme song. You can make a difference. You just have to get up and try.
Mayor, thank you for your time.
Thank you.